Luke, was Lion a writing assignment for you? How were you pitched the screenplay?
I had a previous relationship with the producers, Seesaw Films, because one of those producers, Emil Sherman, had produced a film that I wrote, Candy, with Heath Ledger 10 years earlier. So we had a prior relationship, basically, and a professional, and an affection and a respect and friendship. So they came to me, here's this book, what do you think? That was how it happened. And I read this book and I was like, what do I think? This is like a beautiful fairy tale with elements of nightmare and redemptive qualities. It's like a myth, and like what I think is I really hope that I get this job. I'm going to try and write a structure, and I hope I'm the one you guys want. And I got it. And then it was really fast. Luke, congratulations, you got the job. Jump on a plane. Saru's in India. You're going to India. He's going to show you all the real places where everything happened. The train station, the orphanage, his hometown, the dam, the station, the platform, the rain tank, and most of all, I met his mother, his biological mother, and spent a few hours with her, which was an extraordinary experience.
So you'd never heard of the book or Saru's story previously?
Well, by coincidence, the book came out. When the book came out, there were articles about it online, and in the 4 days or so before that phone call, when they said, "Can you check this book and tell us what you think?" I had read the story. So there was this tiny little moment where I said, oh, I read about that this week. That's kind of an amazing story. The guy, the Google Earth thing. So it was this really vague thing where I had glanced at something that was kind of just this viral like thing that you glance at, like, that's kind of cool. And then 4 days later, they were like, we've got this book. You know about this story? So yeah, I knew about it this much.
So when you meet someone that you'll be essentially duplicating their life on screen, and I'm sure all the pressures that go along with that, what questions are you asking them, or are you merely just observing them?
It wasn't like I had a prepared set list of questions, like, so I'm about to sort of rape and pillage your life and steal your psyche and do this thing. But it also wasn't like observational. It was like, it was like a really interesting, intense 2 or 3 week research trip where I spent a week and a half with him going around India, and then we flew to Tasmania and I met his adoptive parents and the places that he grew up in, Hobart and so on. So it wasn't just observational, it was actually just a lot of downtime where you're just getting to know someone and interacting. I mean, it literally became like, okay, so I'll see you here for breakfast. Or like, so you want to meet down here for dinner? All the downtime things between the scheduled stuff, which was like, tomorrow we're going on the train from here to see what the trains are like, and then we're going to the orphanage and we're doing this. That was all very, but the other thing was just pleasantly getting to know this guy who's really, he's an unusually self-possessed guy. You know, I think the vast majority of us are on some sort of scale where we like to be liked, we like to get on with other people, and we have social contracts about how we behave and so on. Saru is weirdly like, you can really tell he doesn't care what other people think about him. And I think that's because he had such a 1 in a zillion extraordinary experience of compressed trauma at an age where it shouldn't have happened to anyone, that it turned him into a certain kind of human being. That has this self-contained thing and doesn't need the approval of other in order to sort of survive his inner life. But the really interesting thing is that whenever he's with Sue, this is my observation, his mother, his adoptive mother, it's like a lock that opens this door where he's closer to that vulnerable, bewildered, frightened 5-year-old boy. So it's kind of like he grew up, he only had 5 years in India. Then he became a really Aussie guy. Some of that means you're a bit of a lad, a bit shut down, Australian males, you know, like not too in touch with your emotions or whatever. And he's a little bit of that, but he's also a guy who had one of the most emotional sort of mythic stories that you could experience. So he's got all that within him. And his beautiful adoptive mother, Sue, is like the doorway to that, where you see Saru change when he's with her, because I think she's just so deeply part of the journey of where he came from and where he got to.
How many people have you met that have been similar like that in terms of self-contained, that you can just tell they're almost their own island when they're in a public setting?
I've met no one like Saru. There's something really unusual about his bearing. And I don't mean he's cut off. He's really friendly. He's really funny. He's full of one-liners. He's a very wry observer of human foibles. He's extremely charming. He's like, he just, you know, he can sweep the ladies off their feet. You know what I mean? These are interesting qualities. He came out of this place that was pure survival and peril. You know, he's spoken about that. People ask him about his emotions as a 5-year-old. He's like, wait, emotions were a luxury for that period of time. I had to have a hide as thick as an elephant hide, skin. And what was going on was second by second, black and white, yes, no, left, right decisions. Emotions were like far, far away in that situation. So I think some of his journey was about suppressing the trauma of that, and then for 25 years, because he landed in this beautiful deal with these beautiful people, and John and Sue are beautiful people. They always had the vision, there are enough children suffering in the world, we're going to adopt children, we're not going to have our own children. That was like their vision in life, and they stuck to it. And so Saru had that in his background, and so he kept it a secret that all those years he dreamed every night. He imagined kind of like astral traveling back to India to get back to his mother and brother and to say, I'm here, I'm sorry I got lost, you know. Just to say those words, I'm sorry I got lost, it's so touching because it wasn't his fault what happened. It's one of the things that makes the movie so intensely beautiful, because it wasn't his fault. He was just really vulnerable, and he made one single decision. He stepped on a train and a catastrophe began that completely changed his life. That ended up being okay, but it wasn't okay while it was happening. And so, yeah, that's part of what makes him so different from the rest of us.
Right, I've seen a few interviews and I definitely see that quality in him, and I would imagine he would be very good at sort of reading emotions, because that's probably at the base of it how he survived.
It's a survival skill.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got to get really good at reading people. Such as the scene in the movie with the you know, who is that guy? Is he a child sex trafficker?
Right.
And Saru has said, maybe I'm wrong. I might have been misreading that situation, but I don't think so. And you're basically like, yeah, none of us think so either. You weren't misreading that situation.
Right, right. And the way you set it up too, because the woman was so, you thought, oh, he's finally found someone he can trust.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give away too much here.
Yeah.
So when you finally sat down to assemble the script, are you consulting with him, or is it becoming a finished product and then, Saru, here you go, or none of that?
Yeah, it was more the latter. It was so that was really handy to meet him, to travel around with him, to get a sense of who he was. And then it was like, so now I'm in this place with Garth, and then Garth and I came together. So now it's about your loyalty towards trying to create a film that is a rollicking good yarn, gripping, compelling. And yes, of course, at the same time, having a kind of moral and ethical duty towards the fact that you're dealing with real people's lives, very much still alive. But he wasn't part of that process then until it was like, here's the script. And what was really surprising was that his reaction was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. So this is what a script is like. That's interesting. I didn't know this is what a screenplay looks like. All these technical things that you got to work out. What does that mean? And exterior, you know, day, you know, all that technical stuff. He didn't actually have a lot to say about, well, that didn't happen, or that didn't happen, or I feel uncomfortable about that. There was very, very little. Sue, his mother, for example, said, oh, I thought you should have made the orphanage stuff darker. Oh, we thought the orphanage scenes were pretty damn dark. What's going on in there is, you know, very troubling and unpleasant. Some aspects of it. Not Mrs. Sood, the wonderful lady who comes and rescues him, obviously. Yeah, but no, Saru was just like, okay, I get it. Saru and his mum and dad, John and Sue, I mean, they were like, we understand that not everything's exactly like what happened, but we are completely touched by your capturing of the emotional truth of the story. And the stuff that we tweaked, they understood that too. They were learning about decisions you have to make in filmmaking. Okay, like for example, trivial level, in real life, Saru basically drove 3 girlfriends crazy in his 5-year search for home. You know, we've got it's much better to have Rooney Mara, one character, not 3. We didn't need 3 girlfriends to sort of tell the same story. And he was like, okay. So that's the kind of thing you do in filmmaking decisions. That's cool.
Do you remember how many pages his book, A Long Way Home, was?
It's a medium-sized book, I'm guessing 220 pages,
okay.
Something like that.
And then some of the first or earlier drafts of the script, how many pages were those? How are you whittling it down?
I've written some first drafts of other scripts that are crazy long, where you're just getting it all down. We honed the treatment and the plan so tightly that the very first full draft of Lion was only like 125 pages, and that's like raw. And within a week, I had that down to 115, and it kind of landed at 104 or something like that after all the ups and downs, and this scene goes and this new scene comes in. But over that period of the next few drafts before it became a shooting script, a lot of stuff changed, but it wasn't like going from this to this. Yeah, it was being refined, but it was never a big messy first draft, because we got all our messiness and agony out of the way with the treatment. And it was an extremely dense, detailed treatment. It was like a 40-page treatment that was like literally beat by beat, scene by scene. Yeah.
So you're dealing with human beings, but then you're also dealing with Google Earth, which is in a completely other realm. How much research are you doing into Google Earth? How familiar had you already been with the program? Or?
I didn't personally have to. I was really familiar with the program when Google Earth came out. I too, like many people, went to my childhood home and worked out, and memories came flooding back. You know, that was the creek where I used to play with my brothers, and all these houses that used to be bushland and all of that. You know, I did that, and but like, so at a script writing level, what I knew was that we had this tale that felt like an ancient tale. Like, it felt like an ancient myth or an ancient fairy tale that goes back to the earliest origins of like human storytelling, you know, like reunification with the lost mother. And yet, this was a story that in the whole history of human civilization could never have happened until 10 years ago, until Google released Google Earth. We wouldn't be sitting here right now if that app had not been released, because he could never have found home the way he did with these 4 or 5 or 6 visual memories that he needed to basically geolocate from space. And so to me it was like, oh my God, it's an old myth and a new myth. And so what a beautiful challenge to get that in there. And if we handle the first half of the film really well, if we're inside the reality and the distress and peril and bewilderment and fear and determination of this 5-year-old boy, then in the second half, when it gets more interior and psychologically, we're going to experience that as being exactly the same person on an unfinished, interrupted journey. The interruption happens to be 25 years, but we should be feeling like we're in the same person. And the technology, it's not like most films where technology is like logistical kind of plot development stuff. The liberation for us was that we knew that the technological stuff, the Google Earth stuff, is part of the emotional journey. So that you, hopefully the audience, you're feeling it in your gut basically. But at the level of research, I didn't have to do much. I just tried to write the Google stuff poetically. This is what he's seeing on screen, this is what he's seeing on screen, this is what he's seeing on screen. Because I trusted that Seesaw's a great company and that they'll work out the tech details properly. And what happened was they had very little to do with Google Earth, except that the Google Earth coding guys helped make the Google screen stuff completely authentic and period authentic from the actual times that Saru was searching. So they went in, this guy described it to me, we went to Google headquarters, all of us, it was a really fun day. And he described it as the archaeology of the coding. They had to go in like archaeologists to the coding of the earlier versions of Google, and they weren't sure if they would succeed in properly recreating what Google Earth was like at any given time. And they got it down to fine detail. They worked out the timelines of when Saru was looking at. So if you're a tech geek, it's completely authentic. Every single time you see Google Earth on screen in the film, it tracks the time of when Saru was actually searching the stuff. In the very beginning, it's the super slow buffering speeds. You remember the frustrations of the early days of Google Earth. Now it's great. And it was the low resolution when you zoom down to the low levels and so on. So they recreated that. It's kind of cool. Like it's cool in a sort of,
Oh, it was
if you
cool.
need to know the tech stuff way.
Right.
It's, yeah.
Had you talked to anyone else, or had you personally done any like journey back home to confront any sort of like memories or anything, and all that goes through that for someone? Because it's a different trip than someone who maybe has fond memories. It's much more emotional.
Yeah, well, the thing, you know, it's a 1 in a million kind of story because this hasn't happened to most of us. I have continuity from childhood with my parents and brothers and sisters and loved ones. That means I don't have, there's not an unexplained emotional journey, if I've understood your question correctly, that I had to go back and experience. So I had to use my imagination. I just had to have my own memories, and interestingly enough, Google Earth going back to my childhood street was vividly incredible in terms of memories of being 5 years old. When we moved into that street, I was 3 years old, so I don't have memories of the house before that, from 0 to 3. I only have memories of that street, that house, and they're really, really vivid. And Google Earth was like, oh my God, that's the street, that's the curve, that's where we did that, that's where we played it, you know, this and that. And I had to use the leaps of the imagination to think, man, at 5 years old, could I have done any of this? No food, no money, no clothes, no nothing, and in a world full of perils and predators. How the hell? And also, we live in us, you, me, everybody, we live in first world countries where if 5-year-old kids are wandering around the street distressed, it gets dealt with pretty quickly. This does not happen in India. There are bands of feral street kids, and if they try and harass any adults, they get battered away. It's the way of life, it's the chaos, it's the poverty, it's the extraordinary otherworldliness of India that is so not what we know, our privileged first world reality and sensibility. So the leap of the imagination into what that must have been like is immense. And for me, it's just hats off to Garth Davis, the director, because he made that leap. He brought it to life. It's like my script was just this way station at the beginning of the process. But to me, he did such a beautiful job that when I watch the movie now, even though I wrote it and I know what happens every second, I cry every time I watch it because I'm an observer of Garth's beautiful work of art, you know, and he created all these magic moments that took the leap of the imagination and make you feel what it's like to be in such danger and peril and trying to survive.
Did you take any train rides, either by yourself in India or with the masses, as we see in one scene where it just looks overwhelming?
Yeah, well, I did. We went to Howrah station, the main station where Saru got spat out in Calcutta, and that was amazing for research. Also, that's the station where they shot all the scenes, so the real place is the place where it really happened. Up in Madhya Pradesh province, the home village, we went on like a 4-hour train ride and back just to get a sense, just for my research. It was like I wanted to get a sense of the chaos of the trains and the seating arrangements and the structures, just to help with basic technical stuff of how to write what's going on in the trains and what's going on the stations. And the fundamental thing of any travel experience in India, if you've been there, is that it is exhausting. Every single thing is so kind of chaotic, and I mean, maybe I'm sounding like a wimp here, but traveling in India is both exhilarating and exhausting at every single level, from the smallest detail to the largest.